We are greeted by a continent of carelessness and laziness. Here you can raise the level without doing anything. The swordsman lies down, the sword swings by itself. The master of poisons lies around while the poisonous insects themselves figure out which of them is stronger. A relaxed magician for whom magic will do everything, she just has to give the order. The system can take responsibility for increasing your level, allowing those following destiny to leave some games and play others. Games on the mainland are also extremely simple. You don't need to do anything. All dungeons will be cleared and daily tasks will be completed. Every year on the mainland there are competitions where the laziest lazy person is chosen. But the main character is used to achieving everything on his own. His magic is so strong that with just his glance, he can destroy an alien ship. Loyal subjects support their master and are ready to follow him to the ends of the earth. But this whole story is worth telling from the very beginning, when the spirit of the main character fell into this strange new world. Even though he ended up in the body of some weakling, he still decides to learn a couple of dozen skills first. But his zeal is thwarted by the maid Megan, reminding him that the owner has more important things to do. The maids do everything necessary for the master, dress him in clothes, fasten his belt and feed him with a spoon. And the second, more important thing is to enjoy life, have fun and not stress. But even all this cannot deter the main character. He is trying to do something, he wants to train. Megan does not understand her master, because he can do nothing at all. Why these trainings? But the thing is that the main character's superpower is never to be lazy. Once the captain of a warship, he is now lying in the snow. He is in another body and does not understand what is happening. He feels that he is about to die. With the last of his strength he crawls to the water's edge. The main character does not recognize his reflection. He finds himself in another world. Now his name is Douglas Taylor. Douglas is the eldest son of the deep waters. From childhood he was looked after by maids, and he enjoyed carelessness. But today his life ended under an avalanche. But if he was killed by an avalanche, then why are there scars from wild animals on his body? In any case, Douglas decides to first heal his body. Fortunately his skills remained with him. The main character decides to use healing magic, finds the element of wood and decides what basic healing spell to use. But he does not have enough mana. He still has memories of the alien attack on the ship, with whom he entered into battle. Perhaps due to the activation of all 10 schools of magic, he was transported to another dimension. Douglas realizes that he needs to save up mana and use the 10 schools of magic again. Perhaps then he will return back. A cute bunny appears in the area. He notices a bug, which he begins to chase. But the rabbit was not destined to catch up with his prey. A huge animal paw appeared above him, and it instantly crushed the small animal. The beast is clearly not happy. The hunt is almost over, and he only needs one victim. Walking along a snowy path, he notices Douglas and realizes that today there will be a holiday on his street. Meanwhile, the main character caught a fish in the ice hole and healed all his wounds, leaving him with only 1,000 mana points. He would have to spend another half of his points to fry the fish, so he decided to eat it raw. At the moment when the hero decides to feast on his prey, a huge monster with an axe is already hanging over him in the air behind. Mr. Taylor manages to notice the enemy out of the corner of his eye, turns around, and fights him back with a fish tail. The monster freezes, not understanding how his prey turned out to be so fast. It's simply incredible. Douglas is in shock. He was lucky that while fishing, he used wind magic, which increased his agility. There is a splash and the hero is left alone. A huge monster, as if he had disappeared into thin air. In fact, the monster has turned into a small animal and is running away. He must return to the demon world and report the offender to the elders. Mr. Taylor thinks that monsters like his rival could have left those same wounds on his body, and understands that it is necessary to find shelter. He remembers that the maids are waiting for him at the foot of the mountain. He needs to meet them and go home. But first, Douglas activates the element of metal, which affects physical damage. This can happen if someone decides to attack him. The element of metal is activated by 10% and will help the hero discover the bare body skill, which increases strength and endurance. At the same time, on the mountainside, the maid Megan checks the time and thinks that Rudolph has already eaten and returned to the world of demons. She announces that the matter is over and says that she will have to tell the story of how her master died in an accident. Megan looks at the snowdrift where Emma and Amber are rolling around laughing, wondering what they are looking at, what makes them laugh so much. Turning around, they tell her that they are reconsidering how their master is killed. In the video, Douglas runs from the monster with other people and tearfully begs his maids to come to his aid and save him. The servants feel a little sorry for Douglas, because they raised him from childhood. But if they had not sold him, they themselves would have been killed. The main character is lying on a cliff. Under him the snow has turned a dark crimson color. He is still asking for help. He does not have the strength to fight a mid-level demon. On the phone, they see their master flying off a cliff, and at the same moment a familiar voice calls out to them. Their master, in good health and unharmed, stands before them and orders them to return home together. 1,000 years ago, demons seized power on the mainland and enslaved other peoples, calling them lazy. The lazier the creature was, the higher its level, and the tastier it seemed to the demons. The task for low-level demons was to raise lazy people and present them as gifts to mid-level demons. After a mid-level demon eats a lazy person, an announcement appears on the news about an accident, be it a tsunami, an avalanche, or a hurricane that accidentally killed the lazy person. The higher demons pretended to be gods, forcing people to become lazy, and every year they choose several of them, declaring them priests. In fact, they eat them. The servants of the deep water family were supposed to feed their master to the demon, but there was a small mistake and now they are returning home together. While Douglas sits at the table and is dissatisfied with his food, thoughts are spinning in the heads of the servants about how he managed to escape, and why he returned looking stronger than before. Amber suggests that the owner take a walk up the mountain again tomorrow. Their only chance to survive is to ask the demon Rudolph to return for Douglas. The main character tells them that he was almost killed at the top of the mountain. Emma herself is already thinking about killing the owner and dragging the corpse. And Megan is thinking that this is just their first mission, which already requires them to kill. Amber uses all her acting talent, and tries to convince the owner that he dreamed of all these monsters, and that it is very safe in the mountains. But he only sarcastically notes that, in her opinion, he slept so sweetly under the avalanche that he began to imagine monsters. Emma and Megan watch as their colleague tries with all her might to examine the master, and pretends to be worried about his condition. Amber regrets that she will have to part with the gentleman with such a gorgeous body. Emma is unhappy and wants them to spend their energy on a murder plan. She realizes that Douglas now knows about the demons outside, and it will not be easy for them to cause an accident. Megan regrets that they took him out too often, and because of this he could become stronger. The girls decided to push all the dirty work onto her and offer her to kill Douglas, and they will cover for her. On TV, the presenter broadcasts news about an avalanche and 10 people missing. Douglas stands in the bathtub and listens to this news, and thinks that this world is not very different from where he came from. He is worried about the question of why nothing is being done about the monsters. Mr. Taylor suspects that the monsters here are not just ignored, as if no one knows about them. But this is not so important now. He must train while he has the opportunity. He needs to accumulate a sufficiently large amount of mana, then he will be able to return to his world. Megan is watching all this. She does not understand why he is standing in different poses. She came up with a plan to set up a murder. The picture should look like Douglas slipped on the soap and hit his head. In her head, the servant already imagines how she tearfully plays with the sadness of his death. But in fact, after the funeral, the body can be delivered to Rudolph. Having compared all the successfully developing factors, she decides to bring her plan to life. Saying goodbye to her master, she throws a slippery piece of soap at his feet, on which he successfully slips. Flying down, Douglas panics. He is now too strong. If he falls, he could destroy the whole house, so he decides to direct the energy into his legs. The hero noticed an open window and flew straight out of it with his back backwards. At that moment, as a joyful Megan stood under the window. Having landed, Douglas feels a strange object beneath him. Rising from the ground, he turns back and is horrified by the picture he sees. His maid is lying face down on the ground. A trail of blood has already formed under her head. The situation is deplorable. He crushed the unfortunate girl with his body. Douglas directed too much mana into the element of metal, which made his body too powerful. He needs to redistribute the mana into the element of wood, and the ability to return the spirit. These manipulations required a large supply of mana, and again we have a weakling in front of us. But now the most important thing is to save Megan. The hero directs all his energy into her. The spirit returns to the body of the unfortunate girl. She woke up and took a deep breath, as if she had woken up from a long sleep. The girl is still too weak. But the main thing is that her spirit is still there. Douglas has spent too much energy and needs to rest. Throwing Megan over his shoulder, he decides to take her to his room. If the girl is found lying on the street, he will have problems. Amber and Emma received a package with a cake from Yasmin. They are worried that their colleague has been gone for a long time. At the same time, they notice a burning light in the master's room. Emma is worried that the gentleman's father should return soon, and they have little time left. Opening the box, they see a cake with a note for Douglas from Yasmin Dustines. The girls decide to add poison to the dessert. His fiancée sent this sweetness. It could play into the hands of the maid's plans. You just need to add one ingredient, a pinch of special powder, and Douglas will be deader than a corpse. Mr. Taylor got to his bedroom and put Megan under the covers, so no one would notice her. He freezes in horror. The voice of his maid Emma is heard behind him, calling him to try dessert. Douglas orders him to be left near the door. Emma says that the cake is from his fiancée. If he doesn't eat it, Yasmin will break off their engagement. Taking the plate in his hand, he immediately felt that the food contained very strong poison. But that didn't stop him. Douglas puts the entire dessert into his mouth. His fearlessness lies in his second skill of the element of wood, which allows him to break down any poison. Using purification, he broke down and absorbed the poison, which only increased the amount of his mana. Emma quietly looks into the room. She hears nothing and hopes to see the owner's corpse in the room. Douglas opens the door abruptly and asks if there is another piece, while the maid flies to the floor. She doesn't understand why he's still alive and rushes into the kitchen for another piece of cake. Emma underestimated him. Perhaps the girl added too small a dosage. In her opinion, the poison only affected his muscles, so he changed in appearance. But there is still poison left in the cake. It should not leave any noticeable traces. You need to add even more poison. As quickly as possible, she brought the sweets to the gentleman. In 1 second there was nothing left on the plate, and Douglas asked for more. After a couple more of these races, the last piece of cake remains. Emma will use all the poison that she has left. She will show what insects are capable of. She thinks that even if this piece does not finish him off, she herself will die. Seeing how Douglas happily eats the last poison piece, the girl falls to the floor unconscious. Mr. Taylor doesn't understand what's going on with his maids. Maybe Emma is too tired running after the cake. In his opinion, she could just say that she was tired. He could go get himself some dessert. He needed more strength to regain his spirit, while he decided to carry the girl to the bed. He wants the maids to stop hurting themselves. Meanwhile, from under the blanket, in addition to Megan's ears, Emma's antennae are already sticking out. Amber decides to check how things are going with her friends, to see if they still haven't killed him. Looking into the room, she, with her sweet and calm voice, decides to ask if her owner is sleeping. Walking further into the room, she stops and she and Douglas silently look at each other in complete bewilderment. Amber's eyes widen in surprise. She has no idea where the master's muscles went. The girl is diligently trying to understand what happened. Perhaps her comrades exhausted him to such a state. Perhaps he is still alive only thanks to his dragon power. The maid even regrets that the girls didn't invite her, because she is a master at exhausting. Amber invites the gentleman to play pranks. Once even succubi were afraid of her. With all confidence she heads towards Douglas's bed, but trips over a plate on the floor and flies head first into the foot of the bed. So the third maid finds herself in her master's bed, with a huge bump visible on the top of her head. Douglas decides to take stock of today. He learned about the existence of monsters in this world, about strange news and poisoned food. But he doesn't care much about this. His main goal remains accumulating mana and returning back. His friends are probably worried about him. He feels weak and decides to continue tomorrow morning. Douglas also hopes that the maids will no longer make his life difficult. Looking at the sleeping maids, he realizes that after 20 years of service on the ship, he has forgotten what girls look like. He has the opportunity to observe them up close. They have no beard, soft hair and smooth, delicate skin. He compares them to the crew on his ship. In contrast, the girls are pure, beautiful, but at the same time they look so fragile. He crawls under the blanket with the maids and decides to enjoy this moment, because from tomorrow he will start avoiding them. It's morning. Mrs. Yasmin has arrived at the mansion and is greeted by Douglas's father. The father reports that, having returned from the mountains, his son was too tired. Yasmin, listening to this, understands how respectfully the father treats his son, but she is clearly not in the best mood, because his bride has arrived on the doorstep, and he cannot crawl out of bed. To this, the head of the family just smiles and decides to assume that this happened due to Yasmin's excitement and expectation of him. The father happily decides to inform Douglas about the arrival of an important guest, but when he entered the room, he saw his son in bed, surrounded by his maids. Dad froze from such a shock. He does not understand what his son did. Quickly slamming the door behind him, the father tries to distract Mrs. Yasmin for tea, since his son is still busy. She apologizes for not sending them a letter so that the Deepwater family would not be at a loss about the true reasons for her being here. After all, she is not here to drink tea. The lady came here to break off the engagement. Yasmin Dustines is the daughter of the fifth most influential family on the entire continent. The previous owner of Douglas's body courted her for a long time so that he would be allowed to marry her. The head of the family is trying to find out what his son has done, to which the fox notes that there are many such wimps, and she doesn't need Douglas. She informs him that today she has a meeting with the Darker family and asks if he is going to dissuade her. But surprisingly, her fiancé's hands poke out of the room, begin to send her away and wish her a successful journey. The father is horrified. He thinks his son has gone crazy and tries to justify him, saying that Douglas is delusional. The fox, in a seductive tone, begins to say how impudent Mr. Taylor is, talking to his mistress like that. Douglas clearly doesn't like her speech. He doesn't understand how the previous owner of the body put up with it, and just wants to get her out as quickly as possible. He decides to annoy her about the end of their relationship and sharply presses the girl against the wall. The main character starts saying nasty things about Kazakh dog girls and threatens that he will lick Yasmin if she doesn't leave. Mrs. Dustines does not understand what is happening to her once lover, while Douglas' father takes off and hits his son on the head with a vase. But his son manages to grab the vase with one hand, simultaneously pouring water from it directly on Yasmin's head. The girl stands wet from head to toe and listens to her relatives quarrel and try to figure out who is to blame. The head of the family is trying to make amends. He wants the maids to bring clothes to the mistress and prepare something as an apology. But Douglas interrupts his father and offers not to send the servants away, but to take over the cooking. Taking plant petals off her head, Yasmin wonders why her betrothed decides to cook the food himself. She is offended and will not fall for bribery with food. She has decided not to marry him. She needs to wash herself and leave here. Taking into account the past experience of his maid's cooking, Douglas suggests that from now on he will cook in the house. He set a whole table for the mistress. Now the fox is completely confused. Before her chosen one mixed all the food in a blender, and then ate everything that came out. He doesn't look like himself at all. She can barely restrain her mouth from drooling. The dishes Douglas prepared for her look so appetizing. He invites her to try his culinary creations, but be careful because the food is still hot. The fox decides to give his cooking a chance. Since he has been cooking all day, so be it, she will try. Having tasted this food, she is wildly delighted. She has not felt such a rich taste for a long time. Despite all her bickering, she emptied the plates on the table one after another. Douglas doesn't like this, because at first she refused, and now she's been eating for 3 hours without stopping, so you see, there won't be anything left for his maids. After taking another bite of meat, Yasmin explains that she decided to end the engagement because of his frequent walks with the maids, because if he walks a lot, it lowers his level. She would prefer a life where they sit at home all day and eat delicious food. But the main character can no longer see how she eats food without stopping and takes away the trays with the remaining dishes and brings them to the maids. Yasmin is unhappy with this turn of events. Mrs. Dustines does not understand why the guy who once ran after her treats the maids so well. Entering the room, the fox was taken aback. 3 sleeping maids were sprawled out on the bed, and Douglas calmly explained that they played all evening yesterday and perhaps the girls would be very hungry in the morning. With her eyes wide and filled with anger, she asks if Mr. Taylor really doesn't want to take her out. The girl is dissatisfied and angrily begins to explain that the servants exist to serve, and not to play with them, much less cook for them. Opening her eyes slightly, Megan sleepily sees her master quarreling with Mrs. Dustines. The main character calmly places a tray of food on the bed and notes that since she wants to break off the engagement, now they are nobody to each other. And now the way he treats his servants does not concern her. Hearing such words, Yasmin is shocked by his words. Looking at the situation from the outside, the maid assumes that the owner is quarreling with his bride because of them. The fox reminds him that for 40 years he was one of the laziest dragons, reaching the 8th level. But then the maids began to entertain him, and this is what it led to. Megan closes her eyes again and remembers that they started having more fun because they were tired of sitting at home all day. Yasmin continues to push, because if the chosen one has a low level, they will not be able to be together, so she decided to break the engagement. But now, having seen his skills in cooking and housekeeping, he became much more interesting than he seemed before, and the fox decides not to terminate the agreement for now, but to watch him. Douglas continues to stick to the line of what a bad chosen one he is. She decides that it's all because of the maids and is already heading to the bed to burn this ball of snakes. But the maids are not afraid of these threats. They can use this to their advantage. They just need to arrange everything so that Mrs. Dustines burns the owner. They just want to cooperate and start acting. But at that moment a male figure is rapidly flying towards Megan. At that same second, all the food standing on the bed flies to the sides, fried fish and dim sum end up in the air. Douglas gently hugs the girl, and thoughts are spinning in her head that only by killing his maids can they complete the deal. But in his arms she begins to feel something for him. Megan is shocked, and, hugging the owner in return, asks if everything is okay with him. He calms her down, saying that everything is fine. Douglas used an ice shield to protect himself from the fire. The maid understands that Mrs. Dustine's fire magic is very strong, and her master simply does not want them to worry, and endures the pain. Yasmin herself was seriously scared and ran up to the guy, trying to apologize and find out if everything was okay. But Megan did not allow her to stand close and slapped the fox forcefully. The girl angrily declares that the Taylor family is no longer connected with the Dustines family, and the fox no longer has the right to interfere in their affairs. Yasmin took a couple of steps back and froze, touching her burning scarlet cheek. She sadly states the fact that her betrothed once did all this for the sake of the maids. Turning around, Yasmin headed towards the door, waving all her tails, and said a dry goodbye to Douglas Taylor. The main character can finally breathe out. This annoying fox has left, and the maids have begun to eat. The head of the family wonders where Mrs. Dustines is going, because her clothes are still in the wash, or she will pick them up on her next visit. Yasmin says there won't be a next time and hands him a dissolution of engagement agreement that only requires his signature. The father tries to smooth things over and says that the more often the newlyweds quarrel, the stronger the love, and invites her to think again. But the lady does not agree. It was already a marriage of convenience. What kind of love can we talk about? As she leaves the house, she notices the box of the cake she had previously sent to Douglas. It was an ordinary cake, but in order to piss off the groom, she added poison to it. Yasmin thinks that this was the last straw for him, but she realizes with horror that the whole cake was eaten. It is obvious that it was poisoned. No one would even dare to try it. Knowing that he ate every last crumb of her cake makes her heart beat faster. Douglas's father tearfully holds in his hands the paper breaking off the engagement, regretting that they will never become an influential family. He was about to sign the document when he suddenly felt the heat of the fire on himself. The paper instantly ignited and shattered into pieces. The father panics and does not understand what Mrs. Dustines is doing. She announced that as of today their wedding contract was cancelled. After all, now she has decided to achieve Douglas at any cost without the help of her family. Returning to the world of demons, Rudolph makes excuses and the lazy man defeated him with a fish skeleton. He even had to leave his body in order to survive. Rudolph thinks that another demon named Jim Weber is turning away and laughing at him. Jim reminds him that he is one of the leaders of the demons, and must keep his emotions under control. But even having mentioned all his regalia, he cannot contain his laughter at the absurdity of this story. He humiliates Rudolph, reminding him that he is the weakest of the four. But he is also a mid-level demon, and what a shame that his food defeated him. Jim has already sent the maids in order to kill the dragon, but Rudolph will pay for it. The demon thanks him for his generosity, and says that he himself will make sushi from this guy. At the same time, Douglas continues to create culinary masterpieces in the kitchen. The maids are delighted with his dishes, but they are perplexed when their master learned to cook like that. But their meal is interrupted by Yasmin. She came under the windows of the house and is trying with all her might to attract Douglas's attention. Mr. Taylor heads to the window with a basket. Megan offers to go out so that the fox can beat her and calm down. Yasmin says that if her betrothed loves to walk so much, then they can go for a walk with him. Douglas leans out of the window and lowers a basket on a rope straight to her. To Mrs. Dustine's surprise, the basket contains food that exudes pleasant aromas. The hero tells her that if she is the sun and leaves here, she will receive this fragrant cake. Yasmin is very unhappy. Douglas really thinks he can bribe her with this, but he takes the flatbread and promises to return at lunch. The hero already thinks that the fox comes here only to eat. Something stopped Yasmin, and she returned back to the basket, wondering if one flatbread was enough for her. She blushes a little and is embarrassed, putting part of her fur coat into the basket. The fox smiles sweetly and winks at Douglas, saying that this roast is for him. Having received such an unusual gift, the main character starts to think that Yasmin isn't so bad after all. Amber, meanwhile, asks Megan if they will continue to try to kill their master. Having heard such a question from her friend, she angrily throws a half-eaten flatbread at her, which she successfully dodges. Douglas catches the flying dish and scolds the girls not to play with the food. Megan apologizes and says that it slipped out on its own. Emma subtly reminds Megan that their master is just food, while the gentleman is training. The girl tries to convince herself that he is just food for demons and nothing more. There is still a message on the phone that she wanted to send to Rudolph, which says that they were wrong and are ready to accept punishment. She should rewrite it somehow differently. The demon can punish Emma and Amber, since they are one team. But instead, Megan simply deletes the message. Anyway, Rudolph hasn't written for 2 days and will wait a while longer. But the joy was short-lived. A new message arrived on the phone, and upon opening it, the girl was overcome with horror. Attached to the message is a photo of Douglas, with an order to all the maids to immediately kill the man in the photo and deliver his corpse to Rudolph, for a reward. The message also came to a high-level maid, who, having seen the award, became interested in this matter, because for such an amount an entry-level maid would have to work for 10 years. The fox's maid reports to her the location of Douglas, and says that he has 3 maids. This fact surprises the maid. Why don't they kill him? She is offered to cooperate, and kill Douglas Taylor together, and then split the reward. The maid thinks that she can sow discord between them, and this is what she does best. The maid runs to look for her master Thomas Smith to report to him about the message she received. A majestic mermaid appears before her. The maid reports that his girlfriend was stolen. The servant reports to the master that his girlfriend was stolen by Douglas Taylor, and his chosen one is cheating on him. But to the surprise of the maid, Mr. Smith does not understand which girl he is talking about. The servant has guesses in his head that at the moment he is thinking that he saw some girl for a while, but does not remember the details. She reminds the gentleman that yesterday's guest was Yasmin Dustines, with whom they discussed the upcoming wedding. Thomas snatches the phone from the maid's hands and remembers Yasmin, whose maid wanted to tear off her tails and use them for scarves. The servants are angry that Douglas dared to steal his bride. He definitely needs to be taught a lesson for this, to which Mr. Smith agrees. She invites him to take a walk, because if he kills Douglas by mistake, she can complete the task and receive a reward. Megan is trying to get her master out of the house, arguing that they want to kill him. The main character tries to snatch his leg from the maid's embrace, not understanding whether the girl's statements are serious. When asked who wants to kill him, Amber answers, saying that they are hunting him and all the maids, including them, want to finish him off. Megan attacks her colleague, but she doesn't understand the point of hiding it any longer. Douglas understands that people are raised to feed demons. Amber says that they were unable to fatten him up, so they sold him to a mid-level demon. At the same time they begin to blame each other for the failure. They had to leave him in the mountains, where Rudolph was supposed to eat the main character. Mr. Taylor asks the maids how to improve laziness and become a priest, to which Amber and Emma, laying out the bedding, advise him to just lie down and not move, preferably with the phone. He lies down on the mat, following the instructions of his servants, advising him to play on the phone and sleep, occasionally turning over on his side. They throw chips and cookies at him, even if they are not as tasty as what he cooks, but they will also do. Douglas finds these workouts very strange, more like a normal vacation. I can't believe that it's important to look at your phone during training. An article about swords appears on the screen, which doesn't give any specifics. The main character is confused. He does not understand what kind of nonsense they are showing him, and decides to look for other articles. A cute teacher girl appears on the screen, teaching how to make poisons, offering to raise an insect king. She demonstrates how throwing the toxin into a bowl of several insects reveals the main bug. And taking a beetle in her hand, she presents it as the king of insects. This video was also not to the master's taste. Douglas asks Megan if there is anything useful here. She recommends that he type 999 in the search for lazy people. The channel shows the winner of the lazy people, who is applauded by all the viewers and called a champion. The main character cannot believe the logic. The more lazy you are, the higher the level. Megan confirms this theory and reminds him that his level dropped from 8 to 4. The maid says that all his colleagues have received messages about the hunt for him, and gives advice to run away from here. But Douglas is in no hurry, and wonders what will happen to his servants if he leaves. After all, he understands perfectly well that the demons will not let the girls go in peace. Megan looks down at the floor and asks the owner if he is angry at them for trying to kill him. The main character does not hold a grudge against them. They were just following orders. He finds it more funny because of their attempts. Amber understands why Megan liked Douglas so much, and Emma ponders what they should do now. Because of the declared hunt, the other maids will soon be here. A plan arose in Mr. Taylor's head. The demons promised a reward, but did not specify that they needed a whole corpse. The preparations begin. Douglas makes Emma vomit while the other maids cover their noses in disgust. The main character thinks that he needs to throw his hair and nails into this mixture and tell the maids that they killed him. Megan does not think that the version where they vomit him to death is convincing. Their plan is interrupted by the screams of Mr. Smith's maid arriving on the scene, screaming about the stolen bride. Douglas's father meets her on the threshold and wants to understand the situation, but the maid interrupts him. She wants to see his son and will fight him to the death. Megan recognizes a servant of the Smith family, named Tori Greeny. She assumes that this is all set up for the murder of Douglas. The situation is unpleasant, because the Smiths are the third most powerful family, and should not be underestimated. Mr. Taylor wants to know if it is possible with his current level to defeat the enemy. The girl replies that they have no chance against him. Realizing that the task is not an easy one, the main character orders his maids to film everything. He uses magic and begins to split into two. Amber is surprised by the appearance of a second owner, but this turns out to be just a clone, which according to the plan will be killed by Mr. Smith's lightning, and then his servant will have to take the prepared mixture to the demons as evidence. Tori continues to scream and challenge the son of Deep Waters to a duel, while his father begs to spare his child. Finally, her victim appears in front of her, for the murder of whom she is entitled to a huge reward. She can't believe her eyes and tries to calm his father, who shouts at his son to run away. Douglas Taylor bows before her and calmly says that he has come to die. The maid does not understand such calmness of the enemy, while the head of the family is still trying to beg her forgiveness, and the main character deliberately attracts her attention, asking why she hasn't finished him off yet. Mr. Smith doesn't want to fight the boy because he looks too weak, but Tori is sure that the enemy is deliberately pretending. While the clone stands peacefully and repeats memorized phrases, Douglas commands Megan to help piss Mr. Smith off. Megan also has a grudge against Thomas. He is a scoundrel, and she knows how many maids have committed suicide because of him. Finally, the skill to control the clone is activated, and they can shout through it. The clone shouts out what a womanizer and stud Thomas is. Tori is funny with his statements. He is simply jealous of her owner, who has a higher level of laziness and more than enough girls. Megan continues to rage at Thomas through the clone, but is intercepted by Emma. The clone says in a calm tone that Mr. Smith is a goner, and his pussy is small. This hurts Mr. Thomas's pride, because he begins to shoot his lightning in all directions, asking him how he knew about it. Breaking out of his shell, he stands up to his full height, threatening to kill everyone here. All accomplices look at Emma, who tries to justify herself by saying that she did not want this, but simply planned to enrage him. But this doesn't matter anymore because their plan was a success. Thomas flies towards the Douglas clone, trying to incinerate him. Lightning flashes next to the duplicate. After such a blow it should turn into dust. At the same time, Yasmin is trying to get out. She was locked at home as a security measure, but on her phone she saw a broadcast of how they were trying to kill Douglas. The girl assumes that Thomas came to take revenge on her chosen one because she refused him yesterday. She understands that the Smith family is very strong, and she needs to go to help Douglas. After the lightning storm and all the wrath that fell upon the clone, he stands unharmed without a single scratch. Tori and Thomas stand, not understanding how this could happen, why the opponent is still alive. The guys, watching from behind the bushes, also don't understand why their plan didn't work. Suddenly, Mr. Smith begins to cover his mouth with his hand and cough up blood. He begins to faint, but his excited maid catches him. Douglas still, deep down, hopes for another attempt from Thomas to incinerate his clone. Amber wonders what they will do now, since the clone is unharmed. Douglas, of course, can simply blow it up, but this will raise suspicions. The maid suggests pretending to be mortally wounded, but Emma doesn't think they'll believe her. The clone bends down and says that his organs gave out from the lightning bolt, and it is an honor to see such real power before dying. Thomas invites him to say the last words. Noting what a wonderful battle it was, he had already forgotten why they fought. Amber suggests that the owner say something final, and then blow up the clone. Yasmin appears in the distance. She rushes to help. The clone says that he broke off his engagement with her, and now they are no longer connected. And holding his hand on his heart, he convinces Thomas that he should die, not she. Yasmin does not have time to reach him, because the clone explodes and thousands of small particles rise into the air. She doesn't believe what's happening. She still has a picture in her head of them together, and the desire to turn back time awakens. Douglas's father receives a message on his phone from Tori, who sends him money for the murder of his son. He does not understand what money has to do with it. The head of the family is heartbroken and does not understand how his son could leave him. Tori shows the transfer message and wants to take his son's body with him, while his father continues to tell her how his son was the hope of the whole family. Gritting his teeth in anger, he muttered that the Smith family relies only on their strength and thinks that they can just kill a person. But all these speeches only lead to the fact that the head of the family wants to receive even more money for his loss, to which Tori readily agrees. At the same time, Douglas is standing on the mountain, who is glad that his father is playing along well. After talking with him in the morning, he decided to leave home so as not to bring danger to them. He tells Megan that it's high time for him to return, because he's been here too long. The girl asks where he needs to return. Pointing to the sky, he tells her about space, where his comrades are waiting for him, fighting aliens. The maid invites him not to return, but to spend the rest of his life here. Douglas confirms that there is no such beauty and peace on the ship. The main character really likes the world here, but he is not used to such a life. Megan supports the owner's decision and asks how they can help him return, to which Douglas begins to tell her about the elements. There are 10 elements in total: wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, light and darkness. Mr. Taylor needs to collect enough energy to activate them all. As an example, he cites the poison with which Emma poisoned him. He split it and absorbed the energy. The maid exhales because she thought that her poison was so weak. Emma remembers how he healed her using the elements, and suggests that they also poison him and heal her so that they can have an infinite amount of energy. But Douglas pulls her back and says that he spent several times more energy on treatment than he received from the poison. In addition, he is worried about the girl, since it will be too painful for her. While the antennae on Emma's head form a heart out of embarrassment, Amber gives the owner the robe. Just touching the mantle, he feels how a whole 1,000 mana points have been added to him. The maid explains that this is a low-level demon's cloak that increases magical abilities. Megan decided not to be left behind and gave her master reinforcing gloves, which added another 500 mana points. The servants notice that even if their magical trinkets enhance magic, let alone ancient artifacts, Douglas does not think that they will be able to find artifacts so quickly, to which the girls invite him to register for competitions where artifacts are a reward for victory. But he needs to choose a new name to register, so he decides to call himself by his real name. The guy's plan worked perfectly. Tori carries a box with a corpse up the mountain to the world of demons. She stubbornly tries to understand why the corpse stinks as if it was vomited, but she cannot do without difficulties. A column of flame flares up on her way, which she miraculously did not fall into. Mrs. Dustine stands in front of her and orders her not to touch Douglas's remains. Tori is surprised by Yasmin's advanced fire magic. She reminds the fox that her betrothed is already dead and needs to be buried. But she doesn't believe a single word of Tori. She read the correspondence between her maid and her. Yasmin asks her not to pretend, because she knows that it was Tori who killed Douglas. The fox screams and rushes into battle. In the world of demons, a request for help from the servant Mrs. Dustine's is spreading. She stole the servant's phone and now knows about all the secrets. She urgently needs to be caught. Having learned about such a threat, Jim Weber is not happy. With her running around, the fox has dropped to the second level and has become unpalatable. He needs to get rid of it quickly. His monologue is interrupted by the arrival of Allison Teague, whom he just wanted to call. She has already heard his thoughts and thinks this is a great idea. He continues to complain to Allison about how the fox has already crossed all boundaries and her capture will serve as a lesson for the rest, to which the girl agrees to add her to the list. Allison also finds out the reason yesterday's murder of Douglas Taylor provoked the girl to do this. She is perplexed, because Douglas's soul flew to the Temple of the Gods 3 days ago. Jim suggests that his body could now be taken over by another soul, but this doesn't matter now, because he's dead. News appears that a new participant has been registered in the Lazy People's competition, and everyone knows his name, because he is the only one who was able to once wound their ruler. The lady stranger is angry, because she saw with her own eyes how he died. The girl cannot believe that the captain of the Phoenix Mountains warship is named Martin Kors. Douglas consults with Megan on how best to disguise himself. She offers him something feminine. They arrive for the competition. The maids decide to go to the usual places for the public. The girls remind the gentleman that in order to win the competition he needs to be as lazy as possible. But the first difficulty on Douglas's path is not the trials, but the already familiar Thomas Smith, who is trying to ask him for help. Even though the hero brushes off his opponent, saying that he is busy, Thomas begins to tell how his family sent him here to find his wife. He asks to memorize the entire list of his potential brides, because he himself cannot remember them. He chose Douglas for this because he was the first to catch his eye. The maid would come soon, and if she found out that he had not learned anything, she would be very angry. Tori approaches them and Douglas agrees to his opponent's terms, because he gave him some information about his opponents. The maid asks if her master has learned everything by heart, to which she receives an affirmative answer and, in addition to everything, her master has found a friend here. She is very happy about Mr. Thomas's success and shows him a gift, a tail that looks suspiciously like one of Yasmin's tails. Drops of blood flow down the tip of the ponytail, and the maid suggests that it will be a scarf for her master. Douglas, shocked, goes to her to find out where she got it from, to which she incomprehensibly asks if he wants the same one. She still decides to explain that this tail belongs to Yasmin Dustines. She broke the law and during the opening ceremony of the competition she will be sacrificed. Without listening to Tori's speech to the end, Douglas takes off and runs to look for Yasmin. The maid has no idea where their new acquaintance was going. If she knew that these tails were so expensive she would have taken a couple more. Thomas hurries her, since they have to go. Thomas also wants to save Mrs. Dustines, but Tori doesn't want to let him go and tells him to sit still and watch the broadcast. Mr. Smith remembers Douglas telling him before he died that Yasmin was innocent. His maid doesn't think that anyone will listen to these arguments, much less help Yasmin stay alive. Little Mrs. Dustines was different from others from childhood. One day street food was being sold near their house, and she asked her father to buy it, to which she received only a rude answer that Yasmin would not be there. There was rubbish for commoners, she should eat what the servants prepared for her. He even called a squad to remove the people preparing ordinary food for commoners near their house. From an early age she begins to practice fire magic, and she even has success in this. She decided to brag to her mother that with the help of the book she had found a way to strengthen her magic and offered to try it together. But the mother only got angry and burned her daughter's book, yelling at her, because she should just lie down. That's the only way she will become stronger. Even having matured a little, the fox was still eager to go for a walk, for which her father only shamed her. He reminded her how many noble lazy people there were in their family, and it was her father who forced her to marry Douglas. Looking at his profile, she cannot understand how someone can like him. All he does is lie down and sleep. But she is attracted to his account by one recently taken photo, where he and his maids are swimming on a huge turtle and tells in detail how cool it is. Just when she was glad that she was matched with a man like her, her father decides to break off the engagement, since Douglas's level dropped from 8 to 4. Love had no meaning for her father. You can't buy anything for it. You can only die in happiness and hunger. Now she is beaten, covered in bruises and blood. She apologizes to Dad. She holds the box and is ready to die for her love. Allison Teague reads out the verdict because Miss Yasmin read books. She tried to study here, the judge offers to tell her the last words. Live, the fox tells the truth, that they are assigned servants who are supposed to turn them into lazy people to be slaughtered by demons, and that her lover was killed by the maid Tori of the Smith family. Listening to the broadcast, Thomas wants to find out from the servant whether what is being said is true, to which he receives the answer that it is all a lie. Yasmin is trying to demonstrate the correspondence of the maids who started the murder, but all around you can hear the cries of the people, eager for speedy reprisals. Megan breaks through the crowd, asking people to let her through. Emma does not understand what she is up to. Perhaps she wants to save the fox. The girl doesn't want Yasmin to die, because she risked her life to find the owner's body, albeit a fake one. Amber objects to her plans. No matter what they do, they won't be able to save her now. Standing above is Allison Teague. She is one of the most powerful demons in the world. The demoness gently takes Yasmin by the chin and says that her words will not help. They will not be able to awaken the people. But Mrs. Dustines no longer hears her words, because she sees Douglas appearing in the air above them. Below in the crowd there is a bacchanalia. Everyone is screaming and indignant. The maids notice their master on the stage. Douglas picks up Yasmin and tries to carry her away from everything from Allison and the crowd. At the same time, with one touch, he cuts all of the demoness' clothes, leaving her in only her underwear, and causing small cuts on the skin. Although the crowd is indignant, they begin to look at her lustfully. Amber reminds that Allison is a demon of seduction. Emma understands why everyone is staring at her so much, and she wonders how her comrade knows such details about the demon of seduction, but Amber does not want to answer such a question. Miss Teague absorbs the powers of everyone nearby. Their owner certainly cannot cope with her. While the maid is trying to shout to the master and warn him, he wants to treat Yasmin, who breaks free and wants to take the box with her lover's corpse. But Allison catches up with the guys. She didn't think there would be another fool like Mrs. Dustines. But this will not be a problem for her. Soon she will take away all his vitality. While Douglas is wondering what element the enemy is using and how to counter it, Yasmin thanks him and asks him to run away from here. But he does not listen to the girl and decides to use all his defensive skills just in case. Allison is surprised that her opponent has not yet run away from fear. She directs poison at the guys, which breaks through Douglas's protective spell. The spell, breaking on the shield, only added mana to the main character, because it is just poison that he can process. Allison doesn't understand why nothing is happening. She's starting to think she just missed it. But Mr. Taylor understands that he cannot scare her off now. He needs to pretend to be wounded so that she continues her attacks. He pretends that he was wounded and is not feeling well. Yasmin was even scared for her savior. But surprisingly, he decides to open up and says that his name is Douglas Taylor, and they all thought he was dead. Continuing to act out the performance, he said that he returned from hell because they injured Yasmin Dustines, so he rebelled and came for them. In the box, the girls also watch the broadcast and do not understand why the girl deserved such a fate. But despite all this interesting spectacle, the main thing is not to end up in the place of the main character. Out of fear, the poison master even dropped the phone from her hands, from where Douglas's screams could be heard. He shouts for the enemies to attack him since they are so brave. Yasmin asks him to stop. Allison suspects that he came here from another world, while the crowd wants to drive away this psycho who is interfering with the competition. The bodies of everyone in this world are marked. The level in this world is just a number. It doesn't mean anything. A higher level only means that the lazy person is fatter and tastier. Douglas Taylor is a low-level lazy person, but now there is a very strong soul in his body. Allison cannot fight him now, since he can defeat her. She decides to also act out the scene, how she is touched by the love of the guys who want to save each other from certain death. Wiping away the tears from her eyes, she decides to offer a bet if Douglas wins the competition, she will declare Yasmin innocent. But he does not want to accept her offer. The hero only wants her to try to hit him again. His companion begs him not to agree to the bet, but he still decides to agree. But if he loses, she will kill him with her magic. Allison suspects that this is just what he is trying to achieve. Douglas also asks her if there is a place to wash himself, and the demoness points him in the direction. He picks up the fox and carries her away. She screams and does not understand what is happening. Yasmin decides to ask if Douglas is alive. Then what is in that box? He dryly replies that it is better for her not to know. They finally reach a huge blue pool, which is even larger than Mrs. Dustine's house. The main character warns that his companion may not be in a hurry, because in the morning there is no one here. Yasmin just wants him to get out of here first. But Douglas doesn't understand why she's sending him away. He came here to heal her. Yasmin begins to cover her cleavage out of embarrassment, and the hero hurries her. They have half an hour left before the start of the competition. A voice begins to sound from the loudspeaker, warning that the competition will begin in 30 minutes and asking everyone to go to the exit to the field. All participants begin to prepare, because they will be shown on air throughout the country. On the screen, the Poison Master sees the renegades Douglas and Yasmin splashing in the pool. She wonders how they knew that the first round of the competition takes place in the water, with the main character trying to calm a kicking fox. But he inadvertently touches the wounds of Mrs. Dustines, and she breaks free and flies backwards. But he manages to catch his companion, who screams in pain. The main character apologizes for being careless and promises her to be more careful. Douglas looks at the tearful girl. In order to return his corpse, she came all this way and almost died. He promises that he will deal with the demoness who left her these wounds immediately after the competition. Yasmin quietly admits that the crowd did all this to her. They threw stones at her and cut off her tails. Since childhood, she did not like to sit at home, so she only reached the second level. No one needed her in this world, where the level of laziness decides everything. No one believed her stories about demons who raised them for slaughter. But the people are easy to understand. For thousands of years lazy people have been elevated to the rank of gods. This society does not need scum like Yasmin. She tearfully begs, asking Douglas not to sacrifice his life for her. But he does not listen to these nonsense, but simply hugs her and, holding her close, says that he is the same as her. Taking her small tear-stained face in his hands, he is the first person to say that he believes her words about demons. For the first time in her life, she feels supported. He will help other people find out the truth. During this time, he managed to heal the fox's wounds, and now her tails are in place. She is again the same as before. She throws herself on her savior's chest and apologizes for the fact that her father wanted to marry her to him, only so that their family would become stronger. He reassures Yasmin, saying that they have already broken off the engagement, to which the girl asks to give her the opportunity to finish. Now that her family has disowned her, and she has become free, the girl does not have time to finish as the first round of the competition begins. Other competitors begin to jump into the water, taking this sweet couple by surprise. They receive contemptuous glances, and questions about what they are doing in the pool so early, calling them fools who are not lazy enough. Douglas is surprised that the first stage of the competition will be held in the pool, but he remembers that Yasmin wanted to tell him something, but she coughed and began to spit out the water she had swallowed. The head of the Locker family, Dustines, comes straight down to them and immediately begins to ruin his daughter for disgracing their family. The girl immediately begins to tremble with fear. Her father looks at Douglas, saying that he even liked him before. He thought that the chosen one he had chosen would not only degrade himself further, but would also drag his daughter away after him. The only thing, according to her father, that her chosen one taught her was to talk nonsense. Douglas says that his daughter said nothing of the sort. Locker wishes good luck to the main character, because the head of the family, Dustines, is the judge of this competition. Other participants begin to laugh at the guys who angered the judge even before the start of the competition. But the fox remains calm. She tells Douglas to try his best. He would be happy to try, but what should he do? Just sit in the water and sour. The rankings for the competition are split equally between spectators and judges, with 8 competitors required to advance to the next round. The started round will end in 10 minutes, and the main character is at the very bottom of the standings. He does not understand what the score depends on, and the information that he was given for review is absolutely useless. In 5th place is the family of purple magicians Maggie Roberts, a level 6 poison master. She has already managed to infect the water around her. In 4th place is the Peach Heart family. Demi Legan, a vampire profession summoner, is at the 7th level. She is holding a bloody tea party. The 3rd place is occupied by the White Meadow family. Barbara Wilson, an angel whose profession is a swordsman. She is at the 8th level. People are delighted with her. On the 2nd line is the family of Jules, Tina Karam, a profession that follows fate, and she is on the 18th level. The girl is the champion of the previous competition. But the highest score in the competition now goes to Thomas Smith, an amphibian profession magician. His laziness level is 9. He is a lazy person who can sleep even in the middle of a thunderstorm. Perhaps he is given points for his beauty. Douglas remembers a moment from his past when his teacher was supposed to transfer the magic of his ancestors to him. He is grateful, and wants to clarify what element this magic belongs to. She replies that it doesn't matter, it's just that magic will make his skills more beautiful. He doesn't understand what's the point of it. His teacher reminds him that she is the best in her field, and no one argues with her. The teacher was a role model for her students, and all because of her incredible beauty. Douglas decides to use a skill that his teacher once taught him. Locker is watching the standings at this moment. Seeing Mr. Taylor at the bottom of the standings, he is jubilant. But a friend from the middle of the arena begins to shoot a bright beam of light into the sky. All the spectators immediately pay attention to him. The beam pierces the sky, so that the legendary world outside the heavens becomes visible. The myriad stars in the sky illuminate only one person, Douglas Taylor. Tina freezes at what she sees, amazed at the incredible skill of her opponent. Even she couldn't do it. Yasmin's father is equally impressed, not understanding how a lazy person of only the 4th level can do this. He asks Douglas what kind of skill this is. Although the hero himself does not remember its name, Mr. Taylor decides to call this skill just a bunch of special effects. This skill really doesn't cost him anything. Maggie runs up to him and begins to shake him, trying to find out what level he is. And having learned that a 4th level lazy person is standing in front of her, she doesn't believe him. Demi also doesn't believe the newly minted leader of the competition, how level 4 can look like level 25. While they are trying to blame Douglas, he understands that the main thing for everyone is to demonstrate their beautiful skills, even though they will not help them in a real battle. He still won't be able to open their eyes to the truth, but he will try to force everyone to apologize to Yasmin. The hero shouts loudly so that all the stands can hear him that he succeeded only thanks to the goddess Yasmin Dustines. He, a worthless lazy man, was able to become stronger thanks to the blessing of the goddess. She is not the scum of society, but a goddess who took pity on everyone. Hearing these words, Yasmin does not understand what is happening, but Douglas continues his eulogy. She came into the world for the sake of the people, and they attacked her. The hero makes even more beautiful effects by adding rays of sparks of fire, saying that these are the tears of the goddess herself. All the people in the stadium begin to bow to the fox and ask for her forgiveness, however, believing that she is a goddess. And the girl again starts her speech about how demons raise them for slaughter, but she stops herself mid-sentence, and wonders why Douglas decided to deceive everyone like that. When Yasmin found out about the secret of the demons, it was decided to publicly execute her. This means only one thing: they are not afraid that someone will reveal their secret. And there are people who also constantly help the demons maintain this lie. Since her most wounded childhood, Yasmin was not like everyone else. Didn't her father think that was strange? Allison was right. Ms. Dustines wouldn't be able to wake people up because they weren't sleeping. She understands that the champions have always been high-ranking lazy people. The skills of low-ranking people have always seemed too ugly. No one paid attention to them. The girl decides to play along with Douglas and orders the people to make them all equal. She points to the main character, and only thanks to her he was able to use the most complex skill, orders them to vote for him, because their future depends on it. Douglas cannot believe his eyes. Their skit worked, and now he is already moving to the top line of the tournament table. The judge is not happy with this state of affairs. He raised Yasmin himself. She is mocking him. They are deceiving them. Locker himself put marks of laziness on others. But now his voice does not solve anything. Among other things, there are 3 judges in total, but the remaining 2 will not agree with the head of the Dustines family. The second judge is China Milford. She is a history teacher for lazy people. She is an honest person and will not deliberately lower her grades. The third judge turns out to be a transvestite named Orion Kusiai. He will definitely support this guy. Allison pats Locker on the head and tells him to relax because she wanted Douglas to win from the beginning. After all, according to her plan, they can easily arrange his death. The first round of the Lazy People's competition has come to an end. The second round will begin after the draw, which will be carried out by the judges. The round starts in 2 hours, and while all participants are urged to rest, Douglas suspects that what awaits him next is a one-on-one duel. Competitors continue to try to understand how the lazy 4th level achieved such skills. Maggie reminds them that according to him it was a blessing. Tina doesn't understand why he came here when he could just enjoy his goddess. Barbara suggests that maybe he really decided to fight for universal equality. Tina denies this, claiming that selfishness is an invincible instinct. The vampire Demi decides to enter the game. She only needs a drop of his blood to find out about his past. She walked in a flying manner towards the sofa where Douglas was resting, making her gait deliberately unsteady. She fell onto the back of the adjacent sofa. She greets the winner of the previous round and introduces herself to him as a vampire princess. He thinks to himself that she is clearly crazy. Demi takes a seductive pose and pitifully says that she is so hungry, she can't even sleep. The participants, sticking their heads out in the aisle, are watching this picture, already anticipating how the enemy will fall for Demi's bait. But to the surprise of everyone present, Douglas gets up from the sofa and slaps the impudent vampire. The girl falls unconscious, and the main character is now sure that she will sleep so sweetly for at least 12 hours. By the time she wakes up, the competition will already be over. Mr. Taylor is glad to have -1 opponent. The girls freeze with fear in the aisle. In their heads, he's just the devil in the flesh. Douglas, meanwhile, begins to call for help, shouting that the man has lost consciousness. A participant named Olivia Grace is horrified by such low behavior, and hopes that she will go up against Douglas in battle. To all this noise and screams, a concerned Judge China came running. She was interested in why the participants were not resting. The participants immediately begin to rat out Douglas, telling how he hit Demi on the cheek, thereby knocking her out. China reminds the hero that violence is prohibited in the competition. The hero only states that he did nothing, but only tried to help the girl who fainted. On the contrary, he blames the judges for this situation, since Demi fainted from hunger because they did not feed her, and now they are trying to make him guilty. China is shy and apologizes to Douglas, who orders to take the vampire to the first aid station before it's too late. The judge sits down and puts Demi on his lap. The hero recommends giving her blood, but China did not sit down to take care of the victim. She whispers to the hero that she knows about his training in the Phoenix Mountains. The judge knows that he used the secret skill of the Phoenix Mountain sect, and in the beam, she saw his memories. In his memory, she saw constellations and space where there is a war. Douglas cannot believe his ears. He pulls her hand towards him and wants to find out who she is, what else she saw and knows. But China wants him to let go of her hand first. Maggie is shocked by such impudence towards the judge. Tina is sure that he fell in love with the teacher, and Barbara has the idea in her head that Douglas likes older people. After Douglas lets China go, she offers to show him the prize for winning the competition. Douglas notices that from the moment he came here, some kind of dark mark appeared on his hands. Watching as the judge carries Demi away in his arms, he realizes that he is not afraid of any of the opponents. But China scares him. What else can she know? If the main character follows her, he may end up in a trap, but on the other hand, he may miss something important. Having brought the vampire to the first aid station, China wondered if Douglas had decided not to follow her. Although it is not surprising that demons are hunting for him. But these thoughts did not sit in her head for long, as Mr. Taylor appeared on the horizon. With a sweet smile on her face, she rejoices at his arrival and decides to ask if he has decided to surrender to the mercy of his enemies. But Douglas was quicker. He sent his clone to her, and watches this remotely. While Yasmin expresses her indignation about the other girls under her ear, she thinks that he liked Teacher China. Perhaps he likes such women. The hero objects, saying that she understood everything wrong. The judge leads him to the doors behind which the prize for the competition is hidden, saying that after 1,000 years, perhaps he has already forgotten about it. After thinking for a second, Douglas does not understand what he is talking about, but a picture opens before his eyes that he could not imagine. He sees in front of him a huge warship that is painfully familiar to him. Leading the clone into the room with the ship, China shouts to a man named No the Stealth that she has brought a new survivor from the war. The main character does not see anyone in his field of vision, but he is beckoned to come closer. China asks No for permission to tell Douglas the plan, but Ms. Stealth asks him to come even closer. Having walked a couple more steps forward, the clone wants to ask a question, but does not have time to do this, because a spear passes right through him. Yasmin and the main character freeze in horror. The signal is lost. Have the enemies really killed the clone? If they were able to destroy his clone with one blow, then this already means that they are not weaklings. Douglas takes off and runs, While Yasmin tries to find out where he is because the competition will soon begin, he told her that he was heading to the toilet. In his head now there is only one thought to take off, using the intersection of clouds with the element of air. But to maintain this spell he will need 1,000 mana per second. At all costs he must find out how this world is connected to the one from where he came here. Soaring high into the sky, he realizes that in just a couple of seconds he spoiled half of the mana that he had been saving for so long. Douglas reaches the atmosphere and thinks that he needs to save his strength, otherwise he risks not returning back. Having reached the height he needs, he looks at the planet from above, understanding what this world looks like. The main character refreshes his memories from his childhood life of his past body. Douglas remembers standing at the window as a child with other children while they were taught that they would be part of the crew of a warship and would need to train diligently. While everyone was looking at outer space, Martin decided to ask the teacher a question. It is known that every person from birth is associated with a certain element, but their fate is to train all 10 elements. Isn't this a waste of energy? The teacher confirms that his student is right, and no one has yet mastered all 9 elements. But in fact the whole point is not to become stronger. They have gone from agriculture to interstellar travel. In the new universe there are many civilizations that are stronger than them. A war between such civilizations could destroy entire star systems, and people do not know whether they can survive. If they are ever captured or destroyed, the current students will be able to become a trace of their civilization and history. After analyzing all his memories, Douglas realizes that he was not transported to another world, but was thrown into another time. His shocking thoughts are interrupted by a blow to the head, to which the main character decides to turn around to find the object that hit him. An unfamiliar girl appears behind him, but to his surprise he remembers her. She was the very opponent in his last battle. He sacrificed himself in order to kill him. Why is she still alive? While this question haunted the main character, the stranger also recognized a familiar face in him. Douglas has so many questions for her, but if he doesn't return to Earth now, he will simply fall to his death. His mana has run out. The stranger thinks that her opponent has come here to fight her, but she does not have time to find out his true motives for being at the height. As Douglas says goodbye to her and dives down, China asks Northa why she killed the war survivor she found. But Mrs. Stealth is not so simple. He immediately saw that he had no soul and was just an ordinary clone. China apologizes. Apparently she intimidated Douglas too much, and now he doesn't trust them. Northa reassures her, suggesting that even if he trusted, it's not a fact that he could help them. The judge decides that they will continue to carry out their plan, and she and the winner will go to the palace, and then transport the warriors there. Northa does not like the idea of transferring the warriors, because there may be traitors among them. China asks if he suspects her. Mrs. Stealth invites her to come closer so she can look into her soul, to which the teacher complies. Northa scanned her and states that the demons have not yet captured her soul, but she herself can betray her. Even seeing through people, the girl still cannot trust anyone. After all, the one she trusted most in the universe disappeared exactly 1,000 years ago. The second round of the competition has begun. The opponent is divided into pairs. The one who is the first to make his opponent cry will win. The first tournament is announced between Douglas Taylor and Demi Legan, but it is strange where these participants are. Just at the right moment, Douglas lands from the sky onto the arena, and is automatically recognized as the winner, because Demi is still sleeping. Lying on the ground, the hero understands that everything that happens here is inextricably linked with China Milford. He must certainly look at the ship again. Sitting on the podium, Locker gets angry, asking what idiot paired Douglas with a vampire, to which Orion timidly says that it was his doing. Completely beside himself with anger, he shouts at his colleague that he specifically helped the boy win. Orion brushes him off and tells him not to be so angry, or he believes that a player of a lower level cannot be worthy of winning the competition. Putting on a smile, the head of the Dustines family agrees that they must give people hope. He texts Allison to find out why Douglas is winning, to which she replies that their people will take care of him. After reading the reassurance from one of the supreme demons, he still does not understand what their version means. He will take care. While he is looking through his phone, Douglas hangs up on his balcony asking about the whereabouts of teacher China, to which he quickly replies that she is in the toilet. Realizing that in front of him is a person he hates, he threatens him to stay away from his daughter. Orion films this entire scene on his phone. Locker wants to continue insulting his enemy, but notices a dark G mark on his hand. He tries to grab Douglas while Orion, filming, continues to comment on all this along the way. Maggie shouts that the judge took one of the players by the hand and is running somewhere with him. Barbara thinks that her opponent wants to butter up the judge and beg for victory. A certain stranger passes by, lamenting that everyone can only hope for someone's help, does not notice Maggie and his thorn digs into her head. The girls are unhappy with such rude behavior, because he did not even apologize to the victim. Turning back, the rude man laughs. He is not used to apologizing to anyone. He begins an altercation with the contestants while Maggie tries to wipe the blood from her forehead. The stranger decides to offend Barbara, saying that if she drinks so much tea with milk, she will definitely get fat. But this is funny for the girl. All the calories go to her sword. The second round of the competition announces the participants Maggie Roberts and Lebanon Ivas against her. How lucky it is that they are already standing on the battlefield. Lebanon's plan failed. He failed to piss off the girls. But that doesn't matter. His main task is to prevent Douglas from winning. Locker took the main character away and told him that the mark on his hand was a curse fueled by anger. So Douglas could not remove it by cleansing. The mechanism of this seal is simple. The more those who are angry gather around him, the worse he will become. The judge recommends that he hide in some quiet corner where there is no one and do not disturb anyone. Perhaps then he will survive. There is a sharp decrease in the hero's size. Locker thinks that this curse had such an effect on him, but this is simple, because he now has too little strength. The remnants of his mana are still only enough for healing. He constantly takes damage. At this rate he could be left without mana and die. He urgently needs to find it. While Locker wants to send him to the hospital, he asks if there is any water left in the pool. Douglas starts running as fast as he can while the judge shouts after him to stop immediately. Meanwhile, Lebanon decides to perform in the arena. He is going to tell everyone that they are complete idiots. People are indignant about how such a burr made it to the semi-finals and how he got fans. Maggie stands aside and cries. She gives up. Lebanon holds the box with her bugs in her hands. He is only happy with her pleas. But he decides that if she doesn't cry, that's not enough. Lebanon throws the box on the ground and crushes it with his foot. His rival has hot tears running down her cheeks, and she asks him to stop. But tears from her are not enough for him. The girl falls at his feet and begins to beg him. He kicks her, repeating that she should cry harder, while the girl flies away screaming. But fortunately Maggie is caught by Douglas. Lebanon only laughs at them and says that the girl attacked him herself, and he was only defending himself. Our badass name is Levon Iwas and he is only 20 years old. Everyone in the Phoenix Mountains knows him. Passers-by already know his antics. Seeing how he paints the walls, they simply go to report him to the police. Everyone in this world does not understand him. He painted a wall on which one of the astronauts was painted. In his opinion, they are not needed and there are more serious problems. There is magic in their world. That's where the aliens come from. It would be better if they spent money on it. But one day he returned home, and everything changed. Entering the house, he was already shouting to his wife from the threshold, asking what was for dinner today. The girl he lived with turned out to be a guy who had managed to prepare a whole feast for his arrival. Lebanon begins to scream that it was all a hoax, although the man who lived with him never said that he was a girl. Mr. Ivas rushes to the door hoping to call his brothers and give this tranny a thrashing. His story began. Like most victims, an accident occurred in which the person did not have time to break. When he woke up, he saw a girl with pink hair in front of him, who greeted him and said that she had called him here. From today she declared him her slave, to which he, of course, sent her. Trauma from the past now haunts him, and he does not trust the girls. Demi was surprised by his refusal. After all, if he decides to leave here, he will find himself unnecessary here. She turned out to be right, because after 3 days he was dying of hunger. Vultures were already sitting on him, waiting for his death. When he was about to die, a message appeared before his eyes. He received an offer to gain strength and absorb the anger of other people, thereby becoming stronger. His mission is to collect the energy of anger and destroy the enemy named Douglas Taylor. The main character feels that the more the crowd supports Lebanon, the worse he becomes. He lowers the wounded Maggie to the ground, realizing that he needs mana for treatment. Lebanon heads towards them, saying that the little one would continue to attack him. But to his surprise, Douglas finds himself at the edge of the pool and begins to greedily drink water from it. But he has a plan. In the first round, Maggie released poisonous bugs into the water. He is able to turn the poison into mana through purification. While he is replenishing his mana supplies, the girl screams for him to stop drinking water, and Lebanon does not understand how anyone can drink dirty water. Maggie runs up to him and asks him to stop, as the water is poisoned by her. Seeing how she bursts into tears, the thought comes to Douglas that if the girl is almost related to beetles, then her tears can also do the trick. Since childhood, Maggie Roberts was on her own and was not afraid of anything. She is not afraid, she has her own audience, and without people she will not be lonely at all. She knew that someone would come who was not afraid of her poison, and would have knowledge of all the elements. Viewers see a touching picture of how Douglas wipes away the tears of the little master of poisons. The mana begins to increase at a frantic speed. Everyone forgets about Lebanon, and can't remember the reason why they were angry in the first place. The maids and Yasmin, who was clearly unhappy with this situation, arrived at this spectacle. The enemy does not miss, perhaps, trying to offend Douglas by calling him a pervert, and the people are a crowd of schoolchildren who admire the sick freak. Douglas calls the annoying boy over to him, arguing that he wants to tell him something, but Judge China stops him, reminding him not to use violence. She declares Lebanon I was the winner of the second round and tries to lead the guys away from the battlefield. Without having time to say a word to anyone, the teacher transports and separates them from the outside world. According to her, they have very little time left. The main character looks with curiosity at the space in which he finds himself. Lebanon continues to express his dissatisfaction with what is happening, and Douglas does not understand why everyone is yelling at him. China tries to find out how being from the past and fighting in space. The main character does not remember him. Douglas understands that Lebanon is most likely from that time with him, but he does not remember that there were such burrs on his team. The stranger decides to introduce himself as the captain of his ship, who sacrificed his life in order to repel the attack of aliens, and call him Lebanon Ivas. The main character froze in a frenzy, looking at his interlocutor as if he were an idiot. China and the pre-captain begin to quarrel with the hero, who has already realized that Lebanon has decided to pretend to be him. But he decides not to reveal his cards, but to use this for his own purposes. He greets the captain, Mr. Ivas. The main character begins to pour flattering speeches into his ears about how much he has heard about his greatness. The teacher is pleased that these two got along. They can take Douglas to the battle for the palace. The hero immediately wants to find out what kind of palace it is. China talks about the Palace of the Gods, which is essentially a den of demons, where the winner of the competition is fed to the demons. She adds that after the war, demons placed marks on the bodies of all living beings and made them lazy. The lazier the creature, the higher its level, the more rewards. Some time passed and the treatises on magic of previous generations were forgotten, and society turned into a bunch of lazy people. But there are still people who only pretend to be lazy. In fact, they are training and preparing to stage a coup. And now, finally, they have waited for the great hero Martin Kors, who will lead them all to win the world back. Douglas wants to know whether weapons or any artifacts will be issued for the fight. China answers in the affirmative, reminding him that he has already seen the ship. Lebanon expresses dissatisfaction as to why he has not yet seen the ship. The main character is holding back. In addition to the fact that this burr stole his name, he also wants to control the ship. While the false captain has turned his back on him and wants to return to the arena to stage a fight, Douglas wants to freeze him and interrogate him. China whispers in his ear that if he attacks him, the anger in Lebanon's body will consume him. He may not be a demon, but the magic of evil is the magic of demons. They have taken control of him. The judge adds that whoever controls him is most likely watching everything. Douglas says that this could have been warned in advance. He turns to the girl and introduces himself as the real Martin Kors, wanting her to finally begin to trust him. And she reminds me of the time when he sent a clone to her. Apparently he himself doesn't really trust her. She wants to help the main character, find the one who cursed him and save him, and then they will show everyone what the warriors of the past were capable of. Douglas remembers how he blew himself up along with his enemies, but his opponent was resurrected. She occupied the planet and put demons here to rule. They began to raise lazy people for their food, and the once great captain of the ship ended up in the body of a weakling who was supposed to be devoured. He doesn't even know if his teacher, coach, and workers who were with him on the ship are still alive. His sad thoughts are interrupted by Maggie, who brought him a cup with her tears since he liked them so much. He thanks her for her care, stroking her head, and offers her, if anything, to help with any problem. Maggie, unable to believe her ears, wipes tears from her eyes and raises her head, voicing her request to help her take revenge. This was the order of the head of her sect. It is 1,000 years old, because they are the strongest masters of poisons. Her sect was destroyed by demons, but she still had all their memories. She, like Douglas, tried to preserve the culture of her people after so much time. He promises to return them to their former peace. They shake hands as a sign of a deal. Maggie promises him that he can trust her, and she is ready to give all her tears to Douglas. Yasmin catches them shaking hands. She accuses him of first running after China and now switching to Maggie. With her hands folded across her chest, the fox invites Douglas Taylor to stop picking on everyone. While the mistress of poisons greets Yasmin, the hero tries to explain that she again misunderstood everything. The girls learn that Douglas was cursed, and Maggie's tears saved him, and now they need to find the one who cast the curse. They also learn about Lebanon, who cannot be killed, otherwise his anger will consume them. But the mistress of poisons remembers the vampire Demi, who only needs a drop of blood to find out about a person's past. Yasmin thinks this is a great plan and wants to know where she is now, and Douglas knows very well that she is in the infirmary. He knocked her out. The guys head to the first aid station to see Demi Legan, leaving Maggie to watch the competition. Arriving at the victim's room, the fox begins to swear and try to beg forgiveness for such a rash act of her comrade. She shows Douglas and makes everything look so that he even flattens out of shame. Demi is delighted because Yasmin herself came to apologize to her. This is an unprecedented miracle, but she would still like to hear the explanations of the young man who hit her, because she is interested in the reason for this behavior. The main character frantically tries to quickly come up with a reason, and finds nothing better than to say that it seemed to him that she wanted to take him off. The girl definitely did not expect such an answer from him, and Yasmin began to scold him, saying that he needed to be more cultured. The hero continues to play the fool and begins to talk about how he devoted his whole life to service and cannot think about women. Demi declares that no one needs a burr like him, and she just needed his blood. But the fox finds many bags of blood in the payment, and she asks why the vampire needs Douglas's blood. What Demi looks at with her glassy eyes takes her by surprise and she can't utter a word.